When Alysa Liu stood on that podium in Milan with an Olympic gold medal around her neck, the cameras panned to the crowd and found her family. Her father Arthur, screaming. Her sister Selena. The triplets, Julia, Joshua and Justin. All of them jumping and crying and holding each other in that specific way that only people who have been through something real together can hold each other. And for millions of people watching, the same quiet question started forming. Where is her mom? It is a natural question. The kind that comes automatically when you see a family moment like that and something looks slightly different from what you expected. And the answer to that question is one of the most complicated, layered, genuinely moving stories in Alysa Liu's entire life. Because Alysa Liu does not have one mother. She has four. Sort of. Depending on how you define the word. An anonymous woman she will almost certainly never meet who donated the egg that became her. A surrogate who carried her for 9 months and then let her go. A stepmother named Mary who was part of her life for her earliest years and then was not. And a grandmother named Shu who crossed an ocean and gave up 8 years of her own life to make sure 5 little kids in California had someone warm to come home to. None of them are her mother in the traditional sense. All of them shaped her in ways she carries on that podium whether she knows it or not. This is that story. Arthur Liu decided at 40 years old that he was going to have children. Not someday. Not when the right person came along. Now. On his own. Through science. He used anonymous egg donors and surrogate mothers to have 5 children. Alysa first, born in 2003. Then her sister Selena. Then triplets, Julia, Joshua and Justin. 5 kids, 1 dad, no partner. The biological mothers in the genetic sense were anonymous white women whose eggs Arthur chose specifically because he wanted his children to have a diverse background. Biracial. Chinese from him, white from them. A deliberate blend of 2 worlds, just like almost everything else Arthur did was deliberate. The surrogate who carried Alysa to term was a different woman. She was not genetically related to Alysa. She was just the woman whose body became the first home Alysa ever had. Arthur has said that Alysa shares the same surrogate as the triplets, meaning one woman carried 4 of his 5 children at different times. Not the same pregnancy. The same person. Different years. Alysa has met the surrogate. Not when she was old enough to process it. Before she even knew what the word surrogate meant. She had met this woman casually without knowing who she was or what she meant. And later, according to Arthur, Alysa and a friend had almost pieced it together on their own before he sat down and told her the truth. She wasn't surprised when I told her, Arthur said. Think about what that means. A little girl quietly assembling a puzzle about her own origin story before any adult offered the pieces. Figuring out her own beginning mostly by herself. And then finding out she was right. That is very Alysa Liu. Even in the most personal possible story, she was already doing the work herself before someone came along to help. There was also Mary. Arthur's ex-wife. Her full name was Yen Mary Qingxin. She was Asian. She was in Arthur's life during the early years of the children's childhood and she helped raise Alysa and her siblings for a period of time. She was the closest thing to a traditional mother figure those kids had in their earliest years. And then Arthur and Mary divorced. And she was gone. Alysa has never spoken extensively about Mary publicly. The details of what that exit felt like, how old Alysa was when it happened, what kind of presence Mary was before it did, all of that is private in the way that some family wounds stay private. What we do know is one detail that Alysa shared in an interview that is so small and so specific. That it lodges in your brain and does not leave. When Alysa was 8 years old she looked at Mary and asked a question. Why don't I look Chinese? She was 8. She had been living with this woman who was Asian. She knew her dad was Chinese. She knew she was supposed to be Chinese. And she looked at herself and looked at Mary, and something did not add up. The numbers were not matching. The face in the mirror was not the face she expected given what she understood about her family. That is how she figured out Mary was not her biological mother. Not a conversation. Not a formal announcement. A child's eye catching a detail that the adults had not yet explained. She was 8 years old and she was already doing what she would spend her whole career doing on the ice, noticing things other people missed and drawing accurate conclusions before anyone handed her the answer. Arthur confirmed it when she asked. Mary was his ex-wife. She was not Alysa's mother in any biological sense. She was someone who had been part of their lives and was no longer. And Alysa absorbed that. At 8 years old. The way kids absorb things that big, which is quietly and completely, and then they just keep going. The woman who actually stayed was named Shu. Not a mother. A grandmother. Arthur's mother. A woman who had lived her whole life in China, who had raised Arthur in that mountain village in Sichuan with no electricity, who had watched her son survive Tiananmen Square, board a secret boat to Hong Kong, and disappear to America. And then her son called from California and said he needed help. He had 5 small children. He was running a law practice. He could not do it alone. Shu packed her life and moved to California. She did not speak English. She was in a country she did not know, in a city she had never imagined, surrounded by a language she could not understand, cooking and cleaning and getting children dressed and fed and ready for school every single day for 8 full years. 8 years. Not a vacation. Not a visit. 8 years of her life given to 5 grandchildren in Oakland, California, so that her son could go to work and her oldest granddaughter could go to an ice rink and become something extraordinary. Alysa was with Shu every morning before the rink. Every afternoon when training was done. Shu was the constant warm presence in that house, the person who fed her, the person whose voice she heard when she was small and tired and just needed someone to be there. She could not talk to Shu the way most kids talk to a grandmother. The language barrier was real. Chinese was not Alysa's first language and English was not Shu's. Their communication was built on something else entirely. Presence. Touch. Food. The specific fluency of people who love each other without being able to say so in words the other one understands. In 2016, when Alysa was 13 and had just become the most celebrated young figure skater in the country, Shu went back to China. 8 years. Done. She packed her bags and went home to the life she had put on hold. And she was not replaced. Arthur said a family friend stepped in to help after that. But the person who had been the steady grandmother presence through Alysa's most formative years, the person who was there every morning and every evening through the years that make a child who they are, got on a plane and went back to Sichuan. Alysa was 13. She had just won the U.S. national title. And the woman who had been the closest thing to a daily maternal presence in her life was gone. She kept skating. Here is what is remarkable about all of this when you look at it as a whole. Alysa Liu grew up in a house with no traditional mother. She had an anonymous egg donor she would never meet. She had a surrogate she met without knowing who she was. She had a stepmother who was part of her life and then left. She had a grandmother who came from the other side of the world and gave 8 years and then went back. And she turned into someone who was overflowing with the capacity to love and be loved. Unguarded. Warm. Someone who will sprint across an Olympic ice rink after her own performance to hug a Japanese athlete she beat because she is just so happy for her. Someone who talks about her siblings with pure joy and says she loves them to death. Someone who says connection is the most important thing in the world and means every word of it. That did not happen by accident. It happened because every single one of those women, in their own incomplete and sometimes temporary way, gave her something real. The egg donor gave her the biological material of her existence. The surrogate gave her the first 9 months of life. Mary gave her the experience of having a woman in the house during her earliest years, even if that chapter ended painfully. And Shu gave her 8 years of daily, wordless, unconditional presence that a child's nervous system records whether the conscious mind remembers it or not. Alysa was held. Not by one mother in the traditional sense. By multiple women across multiple years who each contributed a piece of something she was allowed to build on. There is a moment from the 2026 Olympics that nobody has connected to this story yet but should. After Alysa won gold in the women's individual event, she skated over to the kiss and cry area where her coaches were waiting. She hugged them both. She screamed. And then at some point during the celebration she turned and looked at her family in the stands. Her dad was there. Her siblings were there. All 5 of the people in the world who share that specific original bunk bed history with her. All 5 of the people who were in that one-bedroom apartment together when everything was loud and crowded and not enough space and somehow exactly enough everything else. Oh, mother in the stands. No grandmother waving from a seat. Shu was back in China. Mary was gone. The egg donor does not know Alysa exists in any personal sense. The surrogate is a woman Alysa has met once, peripherally, without the full weight of that meeting landing until afterward. And Alysa Liu stood on the ice with a gold medal and screamed with her whole body and was completely, totally, unquestionably fine. Not fine in the way people perform fine when they are actually broken. Fine in the way that only comes from having genuinely processed something. Having grown up inside a family structure that looked nothing like what most people expect and finding a way to love it fully anyway. She told a reporter after winning that she had one fear going into her retirement years. Not the medals she might miss. Not the records she might not break. One specific thing. My worry was that I'll have never lived with my family. Not lived near her family. Not visited her family. Lived with her family. The siblings who are her truest constants. The dad who poured his whole life into hers. The people who share the bunk bed history. That was what mattered most to her when she stepped away from the sport. A girl who grew up without a mother taught herself to make family out of what she had. And what she had was enough. More than enough. The 4 women in Alysa Liu's origin story will probably never all be in the same room. The egg donor does not know what her contribution became. The surrogate watches from a respectful distance somewhere in America. Mary is living a private life disconnected from the Liu family. And Shu is in Sichuan, an ocean away, an old woman who spent 8 of her best years in a country she did not know so her granddaughter could have someone to come home to. None of them saw her win the gold medal together. None of them stood in that arena in Milan and watched it happen as a group. But every single one of them is in that moment anyway. In the biology of the woman on the ice. In the earliest memories her body holds. In the knowledge that she was held, imperfectly, by multiple people who gave what they could with what they had. When people ask where Alysa Liu's mother is, the real answer is that she has been standing in 4 different places across her whole life. An ice rink in Oakland. A kitchen in California. A village in Sichuan. And somewhere she has never been and will probably never go, in the life of a woman who gave something anonymous and permanent and irreplaceable before Alysa Liu was even born. She won gold. Every one of them was there.